Part 1. You sit in silence. You watch your thoughts. You try to detach, to find the quiet center, believing this is the sacred path to manifesting your desires. You have been told that a still mind is a powerful mind. But what if, for you, that stillness is a cage? What if, in your noble effort to quiet your mind, you have accidentally silenced your soul? This story will reveal a forgotten truth, that for many of us, passive meditation is a barrier to creation. It will take you on a journey to discover what ancient, embodied cultures knew, that the greatest manifestations are born not from a still mind, but from a body set on fire. By the end of this journey, you will question everything you thought you knew about mindfulness and discover a more powerful, primal path to creation. Mateo was a master of straight lines. As one of Madrid's most promising young architects, his life and his work were a testament to the power of logic, precision, and minimalist control. His buildings were celebrated for their clean, intellectual beauty, but even he had to admit they lacked a certain something. A heartbeat. A soul. He was respected, successful, and deeply, profoundly stuck. His secret, all-consuming desire was to win the bid to design the new National Center for the Performing Arts in Andalusia, a project that called not just for a building, but for a landmark that embodied the passionate, fiery spirit of southern Spain. He dreamed of creating a space that felt alive, a building that could make you feel. He approached this manifestation with the same rigorous discipline he applied to his work. Every morning, for 1 hour, he meditated. He followed every instruction from every guru. He observed his breath. He noted his thoughts without judgment. He sank into a state of detached awareness. But this practice, which promised to connect him to a field of infinite potential, only left him feeling more disconnected, more sterile, more empty. He would emerge from his meditation and stare at his drafting table, his mind a perfect, quiet, and utterly uninspired void. The more he tried to find stillness, the more his creative well seemed to run dry. His antagonist was not a rival firm or a skeptical client. It was his own cult of stillness. A deeply ingrained belief that his messy, emotional human self was an obstacle to be overcome, a wild horse to be tamed into submission through mental discipline. He was trying to manifest passion from a place of passionlessness. He was trying to design a building that could dance, but he had forgotten how to move. His meditation wasn't a spiritual practice, it had become an act of self-suppression, a beautiful, minimalist prison for his own life force. Is he trapped in this paradox, his quest for stillness leading him further into a creative desert? Or is there a different path, a forgotten technology of the soul that can be found not in the silence of the mind, but in the untamed rhythm of the body itself? If you have ever sat in meditation and felt more empty than expanded, subscribe. This story is the beginning of a different kind of practice. Part 2. The prestigious design competition was officially announced, and the deadline, 6 months away, became a ticking clock that measured Mateo's creative impotence. The previous loop closed. His meditation practice had been revealed as a source of his block, not a solution. The new loop opened with a desperate, illogical act. He was sorting through old family photos, searching for a spark of something, anything, when he found a faded picture of his grandmother, a woman he barely knew, who had been from a small village near Granada. In the photo, she was not posing. She was dancing, her face a blur of ecstatic motion, her hands clapping in a rhythm he could almost feel. On the back, in his grandfather's handwriting, were 2 words, Mi Gitana. My gypsy. On an impulse that his rational mind could not defend, Mateo booked a high-speed train to Andalusia. He told his partner in the firm, the pragmatic and brilliant Sophia, that he was going on a research trip. In reality, he was a man running from his own emptiness, chasing the ghost of a feeling in a faded photograph. The journey itself was a transition between worlds. The train flew from the arid, orderly plains of La Mancha into the rolling, chaotic, ancient landscape of southern Spain, a land saturated with the history of the Moors, the Gitanos, and a passion that felt baked into the very soil. He based himself in Granada, a city that pulsed with a rhythm his native Madrid lacked. He spent his days walking, sketching the intricate, flowing patterns of the Alhambra, feeling a sense of longing for a kind of beauty that was not born from straight lines. One evening, drawn by the percussive sound of a lone guitar, He wandered into the winding, whitewashed alleys of the Sacramento district, the historic heart of the Gitano community. The sound led him to the mouth of a cave, its entrance framed by strings of drying peppers and blooming geraniums. Inside, the air was thick with the smells of wine, olive oil, and something else, an electric, palpable energy. In the center of the small, firelit space sat an old man, his face a roadmap of a long and deeply lived life. He was not playing a complex melody, but a simple, raw, and gut-wrenchingly emotional rhythm on a worn, old guitar. His eyes were closed, his body swaying, not just a man playing music, but a man who was music. This was Raphael, a living legend in the world of flamenco, a patriarch of one of Sacramonte's most respected Gitano families. Mateo stood at the entrance, a silent, awkward observer in his crisp, minimalist clothes. When the old man finished, he opened his eyes, and they were not the eyes of a detached meditator, but the fiery, engaged eyes of a creator. He looked at Mateo and saw him completely. "You are very still," Raphael said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. It was not a compliment. "Be careful. A river that does not move becomes a swamp." Mateo, to his own surprise, found himself talking. He spoke of his work, of the competition, of his creative block, of his frustrating, empty meditations. Raphael listened, his expression unreadable. "You sit in a quiet room to find peace," the old man said when he was finished. "That is for monks and for the dead. For a creator, peace is not the goal. The goal is life. And life is not still. Life is rhythm. Life is fire. Life is what we call Duende." He then gave Mateo a task. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "Do not bring your sketchbook. Do not bring your quiet mind. Bring only your ears, and listen not to the notes I play, but to the silence between them. That is where the feeling lives." He has found a master of a different kind of power, a man who speaks of life, fire, and a mysterious force called Duende. But can an architect, a man who builds with form and substance, possibly learn the secrets of the silence between the notes? Part 3. Mateo returned to the cave the next day, feeling like a novice on his first day of school. This closed the previous loop. He had found his mentor and received his first esoteric assignment. The new loop of conflict began as soon as Raphael started to play. The instruction was to listen to the silence, but Mateo's analytical mind immediately began to deconstruct the music itself. He was analyzing the chord progressions, identifying the Phrygian mode, counting the 12-beat compass. He was not listening, he was dissecting. He was trying to turn the living, breathing art form into a set of predictable data points. After an hour of this, Raphael stopped abruptly. "No," he said, his voice sharp with frustration. "You are listening with this." He tapped his temple. "This is a machine for counting. Duende cannot be counted. It can only be felt. And you cannot feel it when you are hiding in your head." Mateo felt a hot flush of shame. He was failing. He, who had excelled at everything his entire life, was failing at the simple act of listening. His inner critic, the voice of his cult of stillness, began its assault. "See, this is chaos. It is unstructured. It is primitive. Your path is one of discipline and control. This is a waste of precious time." The external conflict was a phone call from his partner, Sophia, back in Madrid. Her voice was a crisp, logical anchor to the world he was supposed to belong to. "Mateo, what is happening?" she asked, her concern laced with impatience. "The preliminary brief for the competition is due in 2 months. We have nothing. Our rivals are already leaking concepts to the press. You're supposed to be on a research trip, not a spiritual retreat. Are you meditating? Because it doesn't seem to be working." Her words were a dagger of truth. His old method, meditation, was a failure. His new experiment, this listening, was also a failure. He was trapped between 2 worlds, succeeding in neither. He confessed his struggle to Raphael, explaining that he felt more blocked than ever. The old man looked at him, a deep compassion in his fiery eyes. The problem is not your mind, he said. It is the cage you have built around your heart. Your body has forgotten how to feel. You do not need to listen to my music. You need to listen to your own. You must learn the rhythm of your own blood. He then gave Mateo a new, even more terrifying task. Tonight, there will be a juerga here, a gathering. You will not sit and watch. You will stand. And you will not leave until you have allowed your body to feel one true thing. Anger, sadness, joy. It does not matter. Just one. That is your work now. He is being commanded to feel, a task that is completely alien to him. He is a man who has built a fortress of logic and stillness around his own heart. How can he possibly find a true feeling in the midst of this chaotic, passionate gathering, and what will happen to him if he does? Part 4. That night, Mateo entered the cave with a sense of profound dread. This was his test. The loop of his failure to listen was closed, but a new, more visceral one opened. The cave was no longer a quiet studio. It was packed with Raphael's sprawling family and friends, the Gitano community of Sacramento. The air was electric, thick with the smoke of hand-rolled cigarettes and the intoxicating smell of food and wine. A young man played the guitar with a furious, intricate passion. A woman began to sing, her voice not pretty or polished, but a raw, gut-wrenching cry, the cante jondo, the deep song. It was a sound of pure, unfiltered emotion. Mateo stood awkwardly in the corner, a pale ghost in a room blazing with life. He tried to allow a feeling, but it was like trying to command the rain to fall. He felt nothing but his own profound alienation. His mind was racing, cataloging, judging. This was the core of his conflict, the battle between his detached observation and the raw, unmediated experience that surrounded him. A powerful subtrauma began to unfold through his interactions with Raphael's granddaughter, Elena. She was a dancer of immense power and grace, the undisputed heart of the juerga. She was fire and earth, her movements both precise and utterly abandoned. She noticed Mateo in the corner, his stillness an affront to the vibrant energy of the room. She danced over to him, her dark eyes flashing with a mix of amusement and challenge. "The architect," she said, her voice teasing. "You build such strong walls. Are you going to stand there all night, studying us like insects?" Her words were a direct challenge to his passive observer stance. She was not a potential love interest, she was a force of nature, a mirror reflecting his own lack of embodiment. The pressure from his other life continued to mount. Sophia sent him a stream of increasingly frantic text messages, images of their competitors' leaked designs, links to articles about the competition, a countdown clock to the deadline. Each message was a ping from a world of logic, a world that was moving on without him, a world that felt both suffocatingly familiar and terrifyingly distant. He stayed for hours, trapped in his corner, a prisoner of his own inaction. He watched as the community shared its stories through song and dance, stories of joy, of persecution, of profound grief, of unbreakable resilience. He was witnessing the very soul of Andalusia, the thing he was supposed to be designing a home for, and he was completely outside of it. He was failing his task. The night was ending. He had felt nothing. He has failed to feel, to connect, to participate. He is on the verge of retreating back to his sterile world of logic. What final, desperate act, what unexpected story, could possibly break through the thick walls he has built around his own heart and unleash the emotional storm within? Part 5. Just as Mateo was about to slip away, defeated, Raphael stood up. The room fell silent. The old man did not pick up his guitar. He began to speak. He told a story Mateo had never heard, the story of his own parents during the Spanish Civil War. He spoke of their flight from their village, of the loss of their home, of the hunger, of the fear. But he also spoke of the secret gatherings, the moments when they would risk everything to sing and dance, to keep their culture and their spirit alive in the face of annihilation. He spoke of how the rhythm of the Buleria was not just a song, but an act of defiance, a declaration that even in the darkest of times, they were still alive. The story was not a performance. It was a testimony. It bypassed Mateo's analytical mind and landed directly in his heart. He looked around the cave at the faces of Raphael's family, the children and grandchildren of those survivors, and he was suddenly overwhelmed by a feeling so powerful it buckled his knees. It was a tidal wave of grief, but it was not just his own. It was a collective grief for the history of this land, for the suffering, for the resilience. And mixed with it was a profound, soaring joy. The loop of his emotional paralysis was shattered. He didn't think. He didn't decide. His body acted. He stumbled into the center of the circle, and his foot came down on the hard-packed earth. Bam! It was not a dance step. It was a sound, a raw, percussive declaration. I am here. He stomped again. Bam! And again. Bam! It was clumsy, it was artless, but it was real. Tears were streaming down his face, tears of grief, of joy, of a lifetime of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. The room did not laugh. They began to clap a slow, steady rhythm, the palmas, supporting him, holding him. He was no longer an observer. He was a part of the circle. In that moment, he felt the fire that Raphael had spoken of. He felt the Duende. He finally understood. Meditation wasn't the path for him because he had been using it to bypass the very thing he needed most: the raw, messy, chaotic, and beautiful energy of his own humanity. He remembered a quote from Carl Jung that had once seemed merely poetic. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. He had been trying to grow towards the light by cutting himself off from his own roots, from the dark, fertile soil of his emotions. He has had the breakthrough. He has connected with his own Duende. He is no longer still. He is on fire. But he is an architect, a man of form and structure. How can this chaotic, primal, and deeply emotional experience possibly be translated into the clean, precise language of a building? This moment of powerful, embodied awakening has moved you? Subscribe for more stories that explore the forgotten paths to spiritual connection. Part 6. Mateo left the cave that night a different man. The old, sterile silence in his mind was gone, replaced by the echoing rhythm of the palmas, the memory of the fire in his own blood. The previous loop closed. He had experienced his emotional breakthrough. Now, he had to navigate the consequences of that seismic shift. He walked back to his small rented room in the Albazan district, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel empty. He felt full to the point of overflowing. He felt messy, alive, and utterly, terrifyingly free. His first act was to call Sophia. It was past midnight, but he knew she would be working. I've had a breakthrough, he said, his voice raw with a new kind of energy. I'm throwing out the old designs. All of them. I'm starting again. Sophia, on the other end, was a mixture of alarmed and intrigued. Mateo, what are you talking about? A breakthrough? What happened? The deadline for the preliminary design is in 5 weeks. He couldn't explain it in a way that would make logical sense. I can't explain it, Sophia. It's a feeling. Just trust me. It was a conversation that put their professional partnership on a knife's edge. He was asking for an irrational leap of faith from the most rational person he knew. The consequences for his work were immediate and total. He went to his drafting table and unpinned the beautiful, precise, and utterly lifeless renderings of his first concept for the Arts Center. He looked at them and saw the work of a stranger, a man trapped in a white room. He rolled them up and put them away. He was starting from a blank page, with the deadline now screamingly close. The fear was immense. The professional risk he was taking was catastrophic. If he failed now, his reputation would be in tatters. But his creative process was reborn. He didn't start with lines and angles. He started with rhythm. He would put on flamenco music and he would let his charcoal pencil move across the paper, not drawing a building, but drawing the music. He was sketching the shape of a cry, the architecture of a passionate stomp. His room became a chaotic storm of charcoal dust and discarded sketches. He was no longer designing from his head. He was designing from his gut, from the memory of the fire in his body. The world saw a man who had gone off the deep end, risking his career on a whim. But Mateo knew he was, for the first time, creating something true. He has bravely destroyed his old work to make way for the new. He is creating from a place of raw, authentic power. But the clock is ticking, and the world demands a finished, coherent design, not a chaotic sketch of a feeling. Can he forge this wild new energy into a viable architectural concept before his time runs out? Part 7. The 5 weeks leading up to the preliminary deadline were a blur of ecstatic creation and terrifying doubt. This was the ultimate test promised in the last chapter, to take the raw energy of his breakthrough and give it form and structure without killing its spirit. His days took on a new rhythm. He would spend his mornings sketching, his hand flying across the page, creating fluid, dynamic, and deeply emotional shapes. The building he was designing was no longer a box to hold art. It was a piece of art itself, a structure that seemed to writhe and curve like a dancer. In the afternoons, he would take his sketches to a small, local engineering firm he had found, run by an old visionary who was excited by the challenge of making his impossible shapes stand up. In the evenings, he would return to the cave in Sacramento. He was not just an observer anymore. He would stand with the others, clapping the palmas, and sometimes, when the Duende took him, he would move, his body slowly learning its own language. The community there became his anchor, a constant source of the energy he was trying to pour into his design. This was his new, integrated life. But the cult of stillness, the ghost of his old self, had not been completely vanquished. It would return in the quiet hours after midnight, whispering its poison. "This is a joke," the voice would say. "This doesn't look like a building. It looks like a fever dream. You are a classically trained architect, not some wild-eyed artist. You will be a laughingstock." This was his dark night of the soul, the final battle against his own deep-seated need for control and approval. He consolidated his growth by fully embracing the identity of the artist-architect. He stopped thinking about what the judges would want and focused only on what the building needed to be. He realized that the chaotic, passionate energy of flamenco was not the opposite of structure. It operated on a different, more ancient and complex structure. It was the structure of a heartbeat, of a storm, of a spiraling galaxy. He was learning to see the deep, organic order within the apparent chaos. His final design began to cohere. It was a stunning, spiraling structure that seemed to rise out
of the earth, its roof line like the arch of a dancer's back, its windows like notes in a flamenco chord. It was bold, it was risky, and it was the truest thing he had ever created. He has survived the storm of creation, and as a design that is a true reflection of his transformation. But the design is radical, a departure from all convention. What will happen when this piece of his soul is offered up to the cold, objective judgment of the competition jury? Part 8. The week before the deadline was one of intense, focused work. Mateo and the small Andalusian engineering firm worked around the clock, translating his passionate sketches into the precise digital renderings and structural plans required for the submission. Sofia, his partner in Madrid, acted as their remote liaison, her initial skepticism slowly transforming into a kind of terrified awe as she saw the design taking shape. Mateos, she said during one late night video call, "I have no idea what this is. But it's alive." The loop of his solitary creation was closed. Now the final loop opened, preparing to release his creation into the world. The night before he was due to travel to Seville to present the project to the jury, he went to the cave for a final time. He did not go for inspiration, but to give thanks. He sat with Rafael, watching Elena dance with a fiery grace that now felt like a familiar language. After the music ended, Elena approached him. "So, the great architect returns to the world of straight lines," she said, her tone still teasing, but with a new undercurrent of respect. "There are no straight lines in my new design," Mateo said with a quiet smile. She led him outside, into the cool night air that smelled of jasmine. They looked out over the glittering lights of Granada and the dark, imposing form of the Alhambra Palace on the opposite hill. "You know," Elena said, "the Moors who built that, they were masters of mathematics and geometry. But they were also poets and mystics. They knew that the most beautiful structure is a balance between the calculated and the unknowable. Between the mind and the Duende." This was the final piece of wisdom in a dead It was not about choosing the body over the mind, or passion over logic. It was about integration. It was about creating a space where the two could dance together. He realized that was what his building had become, a perfect fusion of his old self and his new, the disciplined skill of the Madrid architect and the fiery soul of the Granada dancer. He was ready. He was no longer used an architect. He was a channel for the spirit of a place, and he was ready to tell its story. The vision is complete. The man is whole. He is about to present a work that is not used as a sign, but a testimony of his own transformation. Can he successfully transmit the feeling of Duende to a panel of judges, and will they have the courage to embrace a building that breaks all the rules? Part 9. The presentation room in Seville was an intimidating, good paneled hall that represented the very heart of the establishment. The jury was composed of 5 of Spain's most revered architectural minds, 4 men and 1 woman, all known for their intellectual rigor and their sober, modernist sensibilities. Mateo, in his simple dark suit, felt the stark contrast between their world and the fiery, chaotic world of the Sacromonte Cave. He began his presentation. He did not start with technical specifications or budget analysis. He started with the story of the faded photograph of his grandmother. He spoke of his own creative emptiness, of his failed meditations. He spoke of the sound of a lone guitar in a cave, of the raw power of the cantejondo, of the silence between the notes. He was not just presenting a building, he was confessing his own journey. The jury was visibly perplexed, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Then, he revealed the design. A holographic projector filled the center of the room with a stunning, three-dimensional image of his building. It was a structure that defied easy categorization. It spiraled, it curved, it seemed to move. The main hall was a vast, cavernous space reminiscent of the Sacromonte Caves. The central courtyard was an open, empty space, a place of silence and breath. The tower that housed the archives twisted towards the sky like a cry of passion. When the image solidified, there was a long, heavy silence. One of the older jurors, a famous traditionalist, broke it. Señor Mateo, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. This is not architecture. This is an emotional outburst. It is impractical. It is chaotic. It lacks the serene logic that defines our national character. Mateo felt a flicker of the old fear, the urge to defend, to justify. But he anchored himself in the memory of the zapateado, the feeling of his foot hitting the earth. With respect, Señor Mateo replied, his voice calm and steady. The character of Spain is not just one of serene logic. It is also the duende. It is the fire. This building is not chaotic. It has the deep, organic structure of a living thing. It is designed to make its visitors feel, to awaken their own life force. It is not a monument to be observed. It is a rhythm to be experienced. He had said his truth. He had transmitted the frequency. The jury began to deliberate amongst themselves in hushed, urgent tones. It seemed clear they were going to dismiss him. But then the sole woman on the jury, a famously avant-garde architect from Barcelona, held up her hand. Gentlemen, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. For 50 years, we have been building beautiful, respectable boxes. And for 50 years, our people have been feeling less and less. This young man is not presenting a building. He is presenting a cure. He is reminding us that the purpose of a structure is to shelter not just our bodies, but our souls. He is right. It is not chaotic. It is alive. Her words shifted the energy in the room completely. She had given them a new lens through which to see his work. The premise of the introduction was fulfilled. The ancient way, the way of embodied emotion, of Duende, a triumph over the sterile stillness of his old practice, manifesting a creation that was not just beautiful, but revolutionary. He has won. His radical vision has been accepted. But what is the true, lasting spiritual impact of building a monument to the soul, both for the world and for the man who designed it? Part 10. 3 years later, the National Center for the Performing Arts of Andalusia opened its doors. It was an instant global icon. Architectural critics either hailed it as a masterpiece of a new, emotionalist movement or dismissed it as a flamboyant folly, but no one was indifferent to it. The building did exactly what Mateo had designed it to do. It made the people feel. Visitors spoke of
walking into the main hall and feeling an inexplicable urge to dance. of sitting in the silent central courtyard and feeling a profound sense of peace. It became a pilgrimage site not just for lovers of art, but for people who simply wanted to feel more alive. Mateo's life and career were transformed. He became one of the most sought-after architects in the world, known for his unique, soulful approach. His firm in Madrid was reborn, with Sofia now his most passionate collaborator, pushing their work to be ever more authentic. He did not abandon his discipline or his skill, but they were now servants to a greater master, the creative, fiery spirit he had discovered in that cave. He never went back to his old meditation practice. His entire life had become a moving, breathing meditation. His work was his practice. His relationships were his practice. Walking through the streets of his beloved Spain was his practice. He had learned that spiritual connection was not about detaching from the messiness of life. It was about diving into it with all of your heart, with all of your body, and finding the sacred rhythm in the chaos. He had found his duende, and in doing so, he had found his own soul. His journey has reshaped the landscape of his country and his own life. He has learned to create from the fire within. But what is the next evolution for a soul that has learned to make buildings dance? We see Mateo a year after the opening. He is not at a glamorous architectural awards ceremony. He is in the cave in Sacramento, sitting in the circle, his hands clapping the steady, complex rhythm of the palmas. He is older now, his face softer, his eyes holding the quiet fire of a man who is completely at home in his own skin. He is not there as a student or a tourist. He is simply there, a part of the rhythm, a part of the family, a part of the life force that he now carries with him wherever he goes. He learned that the path to creation was not in emptying his mind, but in filling his body with life. We live in a world that worships the quiet, disciplined mind. But our greatest power, our deepest wisdom, our most potent creative force, often lies dormant in the untamed energy of our bodies. The ancient cultures knew this. They danced, they sang, they drummed. They did not just meditate, they animated their prayers. Your challenge is this. For 1 week, replace 5 minutes of your quiet meditation with 5 minutes of putting on a piece of music that moves you and letting your body respond. No judgment, no choreography. Just move. Awaken the ancient wisdom in your own cells. What did you feel? Share your experience of this moving meditation in the comments below. For more stories that explore the forgotten, embodied paths to spiritual connection and creation, make sure you subscribe and join this vibrant community.